Welcome back to Talking with Ted about flora for hikers. And we are in a series now talking about high elevation wildflowers. And we're using a color scheme. Now you might remember how color is not necessarily meaningful with regard to helping us understand if you know this flower, well, then it's related, and you can then also know that one. But they're handy, they're quick, we relate to them all the time, like I told you with these fans for physical therapy. They could simply print the thickness of the material to tell you which one is hard, but it's just silly. They're going to use color because we can just very easily identify and pick up the one that we want. We don't have to read anything. So it's handy, it's convenient, it's not necessarily that meaningful, and the best tip for you to try to get a hold of is family relationships. If you know a member of the snapdragon family and the rose family, cactus family, pea family, there's about 7 or so families that are big in Arizona and the world, and if you know 7 or 8, you are 90% of your way to identifying that specific species. Okay, and once again, we will provide some family illustrations of the common characteristics of a plant family. And Haywood here does a good job of giving us that picture. The other tool I will mention, I have a book here about hiking, flower hikes, okay? Hikes, and they'll mention specific plants that you're going to encounter there. And I wrote a blog for the Courier for about 1.5 years, some years ago, and that was the point of that. This trail, you're going to look for these 7 plants, or whatever it was that I did back then. And you start just building your name base, you'll recognize them again. Some of these plants that we'll talk about here are very widespread, and you'll see them at this one and that one. And I'll try to mention some places that you will specifically see these specific species. Okay, all right, so let's get started with the yellow flowers. Okay, we talked about white flowers last time. This time is yellow flowers. I was asked one time, why are there so many yellow flowers? And I suspect it has to do with pollinators. There are pollinators that lean toward the blue end of the spectrum, like bees. There are some that lean toward the red end of the spectrum, like hummingbirds. But everybody does yellow. So ants and bees and beetles and hummingbirds and all kinds of other things. And so they're just available, and everybody takes advantage of that. So it's just kind of a generic color for pollinators, and that's what it's about, attracting pollinators, not for us hikers to enjoy, but for pollinators to make more of that plant and provide benefit to the pollinator. All right, so columbine is the first one that we're going to start with. There are red and blue columbines as well, but ours is yellow, is the most widespread one. We do have some of the red. The blue one is the state flower of Colorado. I talked before about symmetry, a couple of characteristics, non-technical, that will help you narrow it down, okay? And symmetry is one of them. You remember, thanks to my friend Phil, who had given me, out of concern for my safety, a bubble wrap to wrap myself with on a hike, so if I fall, I won't get hurt. So, symmetry, regular symmetry. Columbine has regular symmetry, so no matter which way you slice this flower, when you're looking at it face on, it's all the same, equal halves, okay? Not every member of this family has that symmetry. Some have bilateral symmetry. You only cut them one way and you get equal halves. Okay, you cut me this way, it's not an equal half. Okay, so pay attention to the symmetry. how many parts it has. Columbine and this buttercup family, they typically have many parts, 20, 30, 40 stamens, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, petals, sepals, and they just have, or pistils and stigmas, and so they're many parted. Some families have very few parts, and so how many parts, the symmetry, and if the parts are united into a tube. Most of this family, the petals are not united. There are some that are, like larkspur. That's a blue one we'll get to another time. But columbine, there has another distinctive feature that has a long tube that sticks out from behind a petal, all right? So the shape, face on, has these, its symmetry is round, but then we look at it sideways, it has these funky little things sticking out, and that's very distinctive, and you'll recognize that, okay? So the other thing to remember is, where does it grow? If you're on a hillside and you see something that you think is columbine, not likely, all right? So they're mostly in wet places, canyons, stream side, that kind of thing, the places that are the best to hike in Arizona because we don't have a lot of them. So Grapevine Canyon, places along the Mogollon Rim where there are streams and springs and that kind of thing is where you look for columbine. Way down the desert too, Seven Springs, columbines all over, north of Phoenix and north of Cave Creek there. So that's where you should expect to find them. Yellow columbine, buttercup family. Okay, next is a family we've covered before, the sunflower family. This is the genus Solidago, and it is common name is goldenrod. Okay, so as you may remember from the sunflower family, you have the arrangement of the flowers, okay? And so it all looks like one flower, but there's a whole bunch of them just shoved together, giving the impression that it's a single flower. Not only are the individual flowers shoved together to form a head or a capitate arrangement, but in goldenrod, they're all those heads are kind of strung together in an elongate cluster, all right? And once you see it, and you'll see from the pictures, you'll remember it, okay? So the sunflower family, as we've mentioned before, biggest family of plants probably on the planet, especially in temperate areas up here. It could be herbaceous things like goldenrod. It could be a woody thing. There are some shrubs, that are in this group too. So it's huge. It has all kinds of variation. When you're that big, then you're going to have lots of options with regard to the leaves and the form of the plant, that kind of thing. But it's the inflorescence, the arrangement of those flowers that mark it out. Additionally, is the fruit. And so you think of sunflower seed, that is the fruit. It's a dry fruit with that hard shell around it, not super hard, you can just break it with your teeth, not like a nut, like a walnut, but it's an achene, and that is characteristic of this family. There are other plant groups that have fruits like that too, but you put that head arrangement, and an awful lot of them are yellow colored. You won't find too many sunflower family plants. There are, obviously they're getting that big, they have a lot of variation, but an awful lot of them are yellow, okay? Sunflower family, goldenrod. And it's more of a hillside plant. Mormon Mountain, on the trail there, part of the Arizona Trail goes through there, and it's all over the place. So it's more of a pine meadow edge kind of place where you're going to find this, okay? Goldenrod. Next. I have several examples in the snapdragon family. This first one is mullein. Now, mullein is an introduced weed, another plant you will find pine forest, disturbed areas. Some plants like disturbance, okay, because they respond well to that openness, a fire, a flood, a road, a trail, that kind of thing. Grazing sometimes is where you'll find mullein. And it's got a big basal cluster of very large fuzzy leaves. Some people talk about it being a toilet paper option. I do not recommend it. I've not tried it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I have tried other things. All right, and so it has, coming out of that basal cluster of leaves, this tall, skinny stalk. It's probably could be 4 feet tall, probably 3-4 feet tall, and it has little yellow clusters packed onto this elongate, what they would call a spike, with flowers that have a slight irregular symmetry, okay? The symmetry sometimes is obviously bilateral. Sometimes it's slightly bilateral. There are gradations. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. Plants as living organisms have, some people are tall and some people are short, but there's an awful lot of people that are in the middle. This is gradation, okay? So this one is slightly irregular and on this spike, okay? Snapdragon family, okay? Big family, 3,000 species worldwide. Most of the wildflower plants, the families are not particularly important economically, including the sunflower family, as big as it is. But they are just pretty, and so people use them in landscaping and floral, a beautifying element in landscapes. Okay, Snapdragon family, mullet, the genus Verbasca. Got it. Keep in mind those scientific names to be sure you know what you're talking about. Next, same family, monkey flower. Now, monkey flower looks like a monkey, apparently, to somebody, and so this is a plant characteristic of wet spots, like columbine, okay? Much smaller flower. It is, the flowers of this family are typically united into a tube, but the symmetry on monkey flower in particular is distinctly irregular, okay, bilaterally symmetrical. And it has what we call 2 lips, so it is bilabiate. And so you don't have the number of parts is generally 5, so you don't have 5 distinct petals. You have this tube of petals with 5 lobes, 2 on the top, 3 on the bottom, okay? So it still has 5 parts, generally called 5 meris, but it's in lobes. It's not distinct petals. Okay. The leaves are usually simple and usually opposite. Remember, opposite, simple, not divided. Okay. All right. Monkey flower, and they could be taller plants. I've seen them in the desert, by little puddles and little tiny things. So once you see that monkey face, you will remember it. Okay. Monkey flower. All right, different family is the milkweed family. Now you might think, okay, well, it's got milky sap, and that's true. There are other plants that have milky sap, so and most of these plants, in order to successfully identify them, and that's the name of the game, is accurate, successful identification. It's not one character, usually. It's many characters. It's a collection of characters. You can put them all together, and you get this family, and then you can much more quickly get to this species. Okay. The one we have here is butterfly weed. This one you see a lot of hillside, drier places too, pine forest, Kendrick Peak, for example, northwest of Flagstaff on the Colorado Plateau, Mogollon Escarpment. You'll find this particular plant, and on it you will find, usually during the daytime especially, bunches of wildflowers. Now the color that we're focusing on here is yellow, and yellow is pretty yellow. There is a slight gradation, sometimes a little more creamish colored, sometimes a little more orangish colored, and sometimes fringed with some other colors, but the dominant color is just pure plain yellow. Okay, the symmetry on this one is regular. The leaves, sometimes though this family is so big, it's succulents. In South Africa, they look like cactus, and they're members of this family. So they could be succulents sometimes, shrubs, all kinds of things. It's pretty big, worldwide in distribution. not a lot of economic value again, except for the ornamental trade. The thing that really sets it apart, two things, is the way it pollinates. You don't have a pollen grain that gets on a bee's leg and then goes on another flower and drops it on a stigma. It's a whole sack of pollen that's transported together. So a butterfly will come in there and this line goes connecting the two sacks. It hooks on that and it drags that whole thing through the air, and it gets placed into the groove of another flower, and then you have thousands of seeds in one piece of fruit, and they're usually dry fruits, and when they open up, and you'll just see them blowing across the land. Okay, so that's its reproductive strategy. Dry fruit, tons of seeds, this sack of pollen biology that really sets it apart. And the milky sap will help you as well. The leaves are usually opposite, simple. Okay? All right. Next, another big family is the pea family. And the one species that I have here for you is golden pea. The genus is Thermopsis. Okay? The leaves of most pea family plants are divided. Okay, they're usually alternate as well. Alternate, divided. The number of leaflets varies, of course, widely. This is a plant family that you will readily recognize and need to know. For a vast majority of plants, very economically important. From alfalfa to peanuts to our state tree, Palo Verde, ironwood. Mesquite, hugely important food plant in this part of the country for thousands of generations, is mesquite, and I eat mesquite pods on a regular basis in the bread that I make. So the golden pea, you'll think of a lupin, all right, and it's that butterfly kind of arrangement. So it's bilaterally symmetrical. It has two what are called like a butterfly wings, and then it has this keel, and then it has a big banner petal, and so it has the 5 parts, and that's how they're usually arranged. And if you know bluebonnets, State Flower, Texas, then you would recognize the shape of this, but this is bright yellow. The stalks are usually tall. Dry sites, pine forests, okay? Highline Trail, North Payson, Basin Mogollon Rim, especially common over there. All right. Our final one that we're going to talk about today in the yellow color spectrum, all right, is butter and eggs. Now, I don't know why they call it that except that it's yellow. I guess it reminds somebody of egg yolks and butter, you know. So it's an introduced weed like mullein. Drier sites, a tall stalk, thin leaves all along the stalk, opposite leaves, simple leaves, but it's got another one of those little tubes or spurs like columbine that come off. This one comes off at the bottom, bilaterally symmetrical, as most are in this family. Okay, so you'll see it in open, disturbed places. A lot of plants that are weed introduced, they like places that are disturbed because they're open and they're quick responders. Okay, they're opportunists, and they are successful and they'll reproduce quickly. So butter and eggs, and that's our last one. All right, for the yellow spectrum, obviously, since there are so many, there's many more, but let's get you started. Look for these, you'll recognize them and see them over and over again, and that's what it's about. So you will have success on a hike, get more out of it, knowing what that is, okay? It's gonna give you a more meaningful experience. I'll see you next time on the trail.